Do you need some cards from today's episode? Well, you can pick them up and support the show from our sponsor, Card Kingdom. Just follow the link in the description box down below. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another super special video. As you know, Core Set 2020 about to release, so we're talking about the set's impact in various constructed formats this week, and it is modern day. We're talking top 10 modern cards from Core Set 2020, and for this, I'm joined by Crim. How you doing today, Crim?
I'm doing alright. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm kind of excited for this video. Modern top 10 lists, they can be a little weird, doubly so for core sets, but I feel like there's actually a reasonable number of cards that I'm pretty confident will see some play in Modern, and then some cards that I feel like have potential to do crazy things, but I don't know exactly where they're going to see play. But what do you think about the set as a whole, Grim, before we talk about individual cards? How does this set rank for the Modern format?
Well, We've already talked, about like the power level of the set and how like sweet M20 is, right? And I think the power level shows because a lot of this is already, like, example, the ley lines are reprints we've been needing in Modern. And there's just a lot of things that can just go right into Modern from this set. So some people were joking about like how this is a core set to like pretty much like follow with Modern Horizons and stuff like that. So
yeah, there's definitely some stuff that I think is going to make an impact on Modern, more so than probably your typical core set, which is great for our top 10 list. We actually got sweet cards to talk about, so let's jump into it, starting with number 10 on our list. And this is the bottom of the list, a little bit weird. This was one of my inclusions to the list, and that is Blight Beetle. So Blight Beetle, it's a pretty simple card. It's a 2-mana 1/1. It has pro green, and creatures your opponent control can't have +1/+1 counters put on them. So my thinking for Blight Beetle is this could be kind of an interesting hate card. We have some decks in Modern that are pretty popular and built around putting +1/+1 counters on creatures, like Hardened Scales is a big example. Affinity interacts with +1/+1 counters with like Arcbound Ravager. We also have Humans, which sneakily is kind of a +1/+1 counter deck. Their main engine in lower like Thalia's Lieutenant, Champion of the Parish, those are +1/+1 counter creatures. So if you can get this down early enough, like on turn 2, before your opponent already has their Walking Ballista or already has like a huge creature, this kind of locks some decks out of really playing Magic in the way that they want to. So what do you think, Grim? Is there any chance that Blight Beetle can be a hate card in the Modern format?
I don't want to say it and break it to you, Seth, but it's still a 2-mana 1/1.
That is true. It's not much of a clock, but okay. So what I'm picturing is maybe like a collected company deck. We've seen recently there was like a Sultai company deck that 5-0'd on Magic Online. Maybe like a Sultai company deck, maybe something with Chord of Calling. I don't think you're going to be, I'm playing 4 Blight Beetles in my 2-drop slot, but maybe like I have a Blight Beetle that I can tutor up, or I have one in my sideboard that I can bring in the right matchup. So I think maybe it has a shot. It's definitely not breaking the format or anything, but I think I'm going to at least try it in that style of deck.
Yeah, the fact that it is a creature is always relevant because you can, as you had mentioned, chord for it, which is relevant. But I still feel like a lot of these matchups, like example for Affinity, you probably have better things to be cording up than just preventing them from putting a 1/1 counter. It does shut things off, like as you had mentioned, like maybe like an Arcbound Ravager or Ballista if it comes down before him, but kind of rare, right? Because like if I know that my opponent's on a chord deck, I'm probably safe to just run these out mostly like early and just start building up the counters early.
I mean, it also blocks Tarmogoyf all day.
It does block Tarmogoyf. And I mean, I would say no one plays Tarmogoyf, but Jun did just win that recent MCQ. So immediately that is wrong. Somebody plays Tarmogoyf and wins with it. So wait, doesn't this block Hogak? Oh no, wait, Hogak's got trampled.
Yeah, I mean, it does, but
it lives. It lives. This totally lives. Oh my gosh.
All right, let's move on. Number 9 on our list, and this was one of your inclusions, I think, Grim. Scheming Symmetry, our new 1-mana symmetrical tutor, essentially. Each player gets to search for something, put that card on top of their library. So, Grim, What do you think about this one? I was initially skeptical that you could play this fairly because since it's a sorcerer, your opponent's going to get their tutored card first and maybe ruin your day. But what are you thinking? How do you use this one in Modern?
Well, first off, you already know in my Modern Mayhem series, it's all about finding what decks I can put Teferi in. So Teferi makes this not sorcery anymore, just saying. Outside of that, I do think this card is actually in the right deck, like maybe some kind of prison-y deck, something that can lock you out, doesn't care what you get anyways. Or maybe like a deck that can like Dimir mill. Right? I mean, you have tons of ways of like either milling the top of their library or getting them to, like you mill something and you cast this and then you surgically extract, shuffling, or even better, like it causes them to search their library, which means your archive traps kind of get turned on, stuff like that. And as we had mentioned, also there's maybe like Thought Scour situations or, like if for like Lantern decks to come back and just lock them out of whatever they grab.
That's, I think, really good points. I think Scheming Symmetry is a card that it's really powerful. 1 mana tutor, very powerful. I mean, it's a vampiric tutor. The downside is you gotta let your opponent tutor for something too. But if you can minimize that downside, vampiric tutor is like banned in Legacy good. It is off the charts power level, like not anything like that in Modern as far as tutors go power level. So maybe it's worth putting a little effort into it. There are ways to do it. You mentioned the mill plan. That's an easy one. Surgical extraction, lantern. So there all are ways to like manipulate the top of your opponent's deck. Thought Scours, for example. Plus, I mean, if you get to tutor first with your like Teferi or whatever, casting instant speed, you kind of naturally break the symmetry. Even like a Field of Ruins to shuffle. Actually, no. I guess that doesn't work because then you would have to draw a card. Like if you could tutor and then like Serum Visions to draw your card and then Field of Ruin or something, you can make your opponent shuffle away. So I think maybe the power level is high enough that it's worth building around a little bit because a 1 mana tutor, pretty strong.
Yeah. And I mean, another thing is like I've been running into a few like Sultai Reclamation decks. That's great. They get a sweet card on top, but if they never take their turn again, I guess you don't got to worry about that either.
That's, if you just kill your opponent before they untap, you got them.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Number 8 on our list, we have one of our new Layline. So one of the rules for our Modern Top 10 list was no reprints. You obviously know, like, Layline of the Void, Layline of Sanctity. They're staples. They're really good in the format, but I like one of the new Laylines potentially for Modern, which is Layline of Combustion, the red Layline, which basically makes it so if you or your permanents are targeted by a spell or ability from your opponents, you deal 2 damage to that player. So what I'm envisioning from this card is a couple of possibilities. In one sense, it works a little bit like a softer version of Layline of Sanctity, where if your opponent's going to try to storm combo you or mill you out with a grinding station or something along those lines where they have to target you repeatedly, they're not going to be able to do that with Layline of Combustion on the battlefield because your opponent's going to die to that 2 damage from each trigger before you die. So that's one possibility, is like the red Layline of Sanctity. The other possibility is playing this in an aggro deck. If you're playing an aggro creature deck, some sort of maybe zoo style deck, a burn style deck, you can play this as a way to sort of protect your creatures and be like, all right, so sure, you fatal push my whatever, Goblin Guide, Wild Mikado. Yeah, that's rough. I wish I had my creature, but at least you're taking 2 damage. So if you're playing a deck that's built around getting in a lot of damage at your opponent, has a lot of reach and burn spells, this can be a pretty relevant way to essentially punish your opponent for going on the, okay, I'm going to play all my targeted removal, I'm going to just kill all your stuff and try to win that way. Layline of Combustion makes that plan a lot less practical when you have to take 2 damage every time you target your opponent's creatures. So that's my take on Layline. What do you think, Grim?
Yeah. I think there are like some applications for this. I think you can probably play it out like Mono Red Phoenix and just any kind of aggressive deck. So it definitely needs to be an aggressive deck because if I'm playing a dirtily deck, I don't think I want this.
Yeah, if you're dirtling, the 2 damage isn't really relevant enough. You got to be playing something that's pressuring your opponent's life total. So it does kind of limit, I guess, the decks that would potentially want it. But I think in those decks, it's definitely in the conversation as a sideboard option.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Number 7 on our list. We have Hanged Executioner, our new 3-mana spirit. So, Crim, where are you putting this one in Modern?
I love this card. I think this is just a very powerful card. It can go in, obviously, spirits. It can go in, any of the Death and Taxes decks, any kind of those Eldrazi Taxes, whichever one. And the nice thing about it is that you can still exile the Hanged Executioner to exile target creature, and that still leaves behind the other 1/1 spirit tokens. So I'm a huge fan of this card.
Yeah, I think easiest home, definitely Spirits, and Spirits is especially powerful because it's putting 2 spirit bodies on the battlefield. So you play your Supreme Phantom into this, you're gonna have 2 2/2s for 3, which isn't a bad deal. It's like the front and half of a Lingering Souls, essentially. But then, instead of flashing back your Lingering Souls for more spirits, you have this removal spell, and it's that removal ability, combined with, as Crim said, leaving the token left over, where I think maybe, Ether Vial Taxes style decks can take advantage of this. If you can put this into play for free, quote unquote, with your Ether Vial, then you can use your mana to immediately exile something. And in that scenario, it kind of gives you protection from a lot of stuff. You can snag big Death Shadows and Tarmogoyfs and Eldrazi. You can even take down an Emrakul. If your opponent is through the breaching in Emrakul, Hanged Executioner is something that answers that when your Path to Exile or whatever isn't going to get the job done there. So I think that ability makes it a little bit more flexible than it looks when Spirits might be the most obvious and common home, but I think it's got a chance to show up in some other decks too.
Agreed.
All right, moving on to number 6 on our list. We have Lotus Field, our new Black Lotus land, and I will admit right away, this is a card that I think I was higher on than Crim. It's a little bit of a speculative pick. It is a card that I don't know where it's going to fit in Modern immediately. My best guess for immediate home would be maybe some sort of Amulet Titan build where this can be a really powerful source of ramp. Even if you have to sacrifice it, you get to untap it first with your Amulet. Maybe there could be something there. Maybe there could be something with Ghost Quarters and other lands that you get in and out of the graveyard with Ramanop Excavator or something. Maybe there's some shell there that can make it work. But just reading over this card, this is one of the cards from M20 that I think is most likely to eventually be oh my god, we gotta ban Lotus Field. That deck is so busted because of Lotus Field. It might be a card that never shows up in Modern. It might be one of those cards where the floor is pretty low and we don't know where it fits, but the ceiling seems incredibly high, where if someone figures out a deck that can break this, the deck is going to be really broken. It just makes so much mana so quickly, do busted things, and kind of take over the format. So that's my take. What do you think about this one, Crim?
I actually have the same view on the card. It's so powerful. It's such a powerful card, but once again, we need to figure out what kind of deck it goes in. And we had spoken about it a little earlier. And I think Amulet is definitely a deck that can abuse it, but still got to sacrifice 2 lands. I don't know. It will eventually be broken. I think somewhere down the line, there's going to be one too many cards that are going to get printed and it's going to help this card out. And then it's going to have to be banned like you mentioned. I agree.
Yeah, so maybe not making an immediate impact, but a card to definitely keep an eye on for the future as more cards enter the Modern format. People build more decks, find more synergies, because a land that taps for 3 mana, that's just a powerful card on its face.
Yeah. 4 of them almost cast a big Emrakul.
Yeah. That is true. Maybe we'll have Lotus Fields Stifle deck, and you just try to stifle your Lotus Fields and then play an Emrakul.
Seth, please. It's your favorite card. You just played Blood Moon.
All right, let's move on. Number 5 on our list. And I gotta hear your thoughts on Mystic Forge, Crib. When I first read this card, I was like, okay, that's cool, but is it just a bad experimental frenzy? But after talking to you about it, there might be more to it than I gave it credit for at first.
Yeah, the pizza oven is great. I love it. The reason why this is so powerful is because I do like the fact that you can tap it, pay a life, exile the top card of your library. Experimental frenzy, sometimes you just kind of get stuck with the land on top. And with this card, I feel like it can go in a whir deck, so you can kind of immediately just shuffle your deck back up again. Or we had mentioned earlier, maybe a lantern style deck. It seems like a card that can just go off. help you like get through a ton of your deck.
Yeah, I think, so one of the things that's nice about this card that doesn't work with Frenzy is you can still cast cards from your hand, which in something like a Word deck that's looking to hide behind an Ensnaring Bridge a lot of the time is really important. Like your Word deck, you literally can't play Experimental Frenzy because you turn off your Ensnaring Bridges and you end up dying because you don't have Ensnaring Bridge. Mystic Forge, since you can play cards from your hand, actually has some relevance there. So I think while, like a deck like Affinity is a deck people brought up, while I think Affinity is probably the style of deck that would rather still just play Experimental Frenzy, there are decks out there where Mystic Forge can do a pretty good approximation of Experimental Frenzy, which has proven itself to be a very busted card. But otherwise those decks wouldn't be able to play Frenzy because of that can't cast cards from hand downside.
Yeah, I think actually in the decks that are going to probably play this, it would be better than a Frenzy. So yeah, because of that exact reason, I can still play with my cards. Also, yeah, I have this activated ability that exiles a land. So that means I won't see that land again. So if we shuffle the library, once again, lower, deck thinning. You know what I mean? Hashtag deck thinning.
Oh no, the deck thinning argument for Mystic Forge.
Yep.
Okay, yes, it is 4 mana thin your deck by 1 land. I forgot about that part. But no, I think this card is actually a very powerful effect. And even though I don't exactly buy the deck thinning argument, it is nice that it does get you 1 card deeper. We've seen
from
with
deck thinning.
We've seen that with Experimental Frenzy. The way that it fizzles is you hit multiple lands, and that's what fizzles your Frenzy. Mystic Forge gets you through 1 land naturally by just tapping it and paying 1 life. So it does do a very good Experimental Frenzy approximation with some really relevant upsides if you're playing a deck with a lot of artifacts and colorless non-land cards.
Yep.
Well, let's move on. Number 4 on our list, we have the world's smallest Knight of the Reliquary, Elvish Reclaimer. 1 mana, pretty efficient, comes down early, lets you tutor for specific lands, most importantly, not a basic land. It lets you tutor for any land, so in theory you could be assembling Tron or other land-based combos, finding your Ghost Quarter. What do you think about this little elf, Crim?
Well, this is one of the ones where I think so far the only deck I could see it getting played in is something with a Knight of the Reliquary style deck. So any of those Celestia mid-range, just grindy decks that are just all about Ramanap Excavator and just, doing that over and over. And then the card is sweet. You only need to have 3 or more land cards in the graveyard and it becomes a 3/4 for 1 mana. I don't know. I like that.
But Crim, I figured you'd love this card because every time you activate it, it thins your deck.
Oh yeah, no, and that's the biggest selling point, right? Like deck thinning. Once again, hashtag deck thinning.
I think I pretty much agree with you. This feels like something you could play in like the green-white value town deck.
Hold on, did you just say you agree? So that means you agree on all points I've said, right?
Minus the deck thinning.
Oh,
Except
wow.
for that's just implied that I never agree with that part. But I think you're right. Like a green-white value town deck, something where you're trying to tutor up your Ghost Quarters and Field of Ruins and like strip mine your opponent out of the game by replaying them with Ramanap Excavator, kind of a backup version of Knight of the Reliquary. It does get big pretty fast. Like even just with fetch lands, this is going to end up being a 3/4 really quickly, 3/4 dodging lightning bolt being a somewhat relevant clock on its own where it's growing into a realistic threat. So I think because it's pretty unique in what it does, I don't think like your elf deck plays it. Other things where you might think, oh, it's a 1 mana elf, I can play it there. But I do think in the right shell, Elvish Reclaimer is a really powerful effect. One thing we've learned is that cards that can tutor up non-basic lands have a lot of potential. We see, Expedition Map, we see Sylvan Scrying, we see Knight of the Reliquary. All of those are cards that see heavy play in various formats. I think the Elvish Reclaimer, because it can get non-basics, someone's going to figure out a use for this card.
Yeah. The only thing here is you are paying 2 mana and sacking a land.
That is true. That is a really good point. It is efficient to cast, but it is a little expensive to use. But I still think that someone's going to figure out a way to take advantage of it.
Oh,
and
definitely.
If you have your like Ramanamp Excavator, Crucible of Worlds, getting a land to the graveyard isn't the end of the world because you're going to get it back again, or Life from the Loam. You're going to get it back again anyway. So I like that you can build around it. I don't think you just slot it into any random deck, but in a deck that is kind of built around the effect a little bit, has potential to be really strong.
Yeah, I'm not putting, like you had mentioned earlier, I'm definitely not putting this in my like Elves deck.
Let's move on. Number 3 on our list. And we have a card that actually topped our standard list in our top 3 for Modern as well. Chandra Awakened Inferno. So, Crim, what is our big new Mythic Chandra going to do in the Modern format?
Let's take a look here. I mean, you have deals X damage. That minus X there, the flexibility of that is huge because it exiles. And right now, with the way Modern's shaping up to be, like, I really love exile effects. If it exiles, perfect. Also has a board sweep ability, just what I want out of a 6 mana planeswalker. Unless of course I'm playing against a weird elemental tribal deck. And then, like the emblem will kill you, and it'll probably, like, it kills you in standard. It probably kills you faster in Modern because everyone fetches and shocks and all that other stuff. And so like Modern, everyone like starts at 15.
Yeah. And I think, one deck I really like to play in Modern is the mono red prison deck. I feel like Chandra could be a really good finisher there. I don't think it replaces the 4 mana Chandra because it isn't a card advantage source, but this is a really legitimate fast clock. You kind of lock up the game with all your ensnaring bridges and chalices and blood moons. Then you play this, and if you just keep plussing and making emblems, you actually kill your opponent really quickly. Maybe like 4-ish turns, you're going to be up to 10 damage, and then it just scales from there. So it is going to close out the game quick enough that if you're hiding behind all the prison pieces, it should be fast enough to kill your opponent before they are able to break out from the lock. Plus, it has all this upside where maybe you haven't drawn your ensnaring bridge. You can sweep away a bunch of cheap creatures with the -3 or take down a big attacker with the -X. So I think that's a possibility. Curious if maybe like Jeskai Control could play this as a one-of on the top end of their curve. Maybe like a Ponza style deck that is built around ramping into powerful 6-drops to close out the game. This is a powerful 6-drop that can close out the game. So I think there's definitely quite a few possibilities for Chandra in Modern.
Yeah. And just like you had mentioned, I definitely see it in something like a prison deck, and obviously any ramp deck. This card coming down any earlier than turn 6 is going to be a beating.
Yeah, and you got to remember, we're talking Modern, where you have like Arbor Elf Utopia Sprawl, which just makes absurd amounts of mana so quickly. You could be casting this on turn 3 in some decks in Modern, and I don't think many decks are going to beat this on turn 3.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I don't think anyone's beating this on turn 3.
Well, let's move on. Number 2 on our... that is true. Karn. Let's move on. Number 2 on our list. And this is what we actually had a bit of a debate about, or a conversation about going into our list. Brought Back. Brought Back is the card that I would say is my pick to be most likely to be broken at some point, even ahead of Lotus Field. I think this card reminds me a little bit of like Face Reward, some of the eggs combo pieces that are now banned in the format. It's a really powerful, potentially combo enabling effect. However, I don't know if this is going to see play right away. This is one of those speculative long-term things. I guess, like, the floor on the card is kind of like a explosive vegetation with fetch lands. You play a fetch, crack them both, get them both back, get up to like 5 mana on turn 3 to, I don't know, cast a Teferi or something. Does that win you over, Crib? If I say Teferi there, does this convince you about Brought Back?
Huh. You are right. I'm throwing a Teferi on there, but as I said earlier, if you're killing my Teferi, that means I've done something wrong. I do agree with you though. This card does have a ridiculous chance of like being broken and doing some really wonky things. But right now, like I don't know. It is just like a ramp spell, right?
It is kind of a ramp spell. You can do some tricks if you have, again, like Ghost Quarter type effects or something, kind of strip mining, or like Flagstones of Tarkir is really cool. You like Legend Rule and tutor out lands and get them back and tutor out lands. So you can do some really cool ramp stuff with it. I think that the main reason I think it'll be broken is I feel like this will be a combo enabler eventually. I've been looking around trying to find combos. Right now, there's not anything that really jumps out as being like an easy 2-card combo with Brought Back, but I think that it's something that'll get there eventually. Maybe the biggest vote against it for right now, immediate future, with Hogak still kind of dominating the format, is there is an absurd amount of graveyard hate. Like, I still find myself amazed at how much graveyard hate people are playing. I see people playing 6 or even 8 graveyard hate spells now just to try to fight the Hogak deck. So I feel like it's a little risky to go on the like, hey, I'm gonna crack my fetch lands and get a back plan when everyone is playing Leyline to the Void and Rest in Peace and Tormod Script. But sooner or later, I think someone's going to figure out how to break this card.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Well, let's move on. Number 1 on our list, we're going the exact opposite direction for Brought Back. This is a card that we know that it's going to see play. We know where it's going to see play, and that is Goblin Ringleader. So Crim, technically not a brand new card. It is a reprint, but it is also new to Modern. People were wondering where this was during Modern Horizons. Well, now we know it's in Core Set 2020. What are we doing with Ringleader in the Modern format, Crim?
We are going to put this in a controlled, no, I'm just going to put this in a Goblin deck. I mean, this is what Goblins, like, I think, was it a couple podcasts back during like Horizon spoilers, we were talking about how all Goblins really needs now is a Ringleader. And here it is. So, you know, a way to refill your hand, gas back up after, you know, you've run out, deployed all your threats. This card is huge. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put all Goblin cards, all of them. So if my deck is loaded up with goblins and you're telling me I get all of this and a 2/2 haster, yeah, I'll take that deal every day of the week.
Yeah, Ringleader is one of the cards that makes Goblins in Legacy oddly one of the better card advantage decks in the format, with the combination of like Goblin Matron to get Goblin Ringleader to find more Ringleaders and find more Matrons. You actually draw more cards in Legacy Goblins than you do with a lot of the control decks in the format, and I feel like this is a card that really changes the dynamic for how Goblins play in the Modern format. Before Modern Horizons, Goblins were essentially all in aggro, like the 8-whack style of Goblin deck. With Modern Horizons, we've started to see a bit of a shift. There's still the 8-whack style floating around, but people are playing more like Ether Vial Goblins, Goblin Matrons, tutoring up like Silver Bullet 1-of Goblins. Goblin Ringleader is a card that really can push that plan into overdrive, and I think, we'll see. The format is so unfair right now and so in flux with Hogak and Modern Horizons. We'll see how it shakes out, but I think that Goblin Ringleader is the card that maybe can jump the Vial style Goblins deck up like an entire tier in the format and actually be a really legitimate tribal deck in Modern.
Yeah, I think the only thing the Goblins deck are obviously missing is just like Wasteland and you know, stuff like that, right? But that's fine. Those cards don't need to come back. And you know, even through the like the crazy unfair field that is Modern right now, you still see Goblins deck, like a Goblins deck, like slogging through it and going 5-0 in like the leagues and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I don't know.
No,
I mean, that's without this.
Rise.
Yeah, that's without this.
And card advantage is still something that the deck kind of lacks. Like, while Matron helps, and you can tutor up, like, Mons to fight through Wraths and stuff, you really don't have okay, I'm gonna refuel on Goblin's hand. And when you consider these Goblin decks, a lot of them are playing, like, maybe 18, 20 lands, 4 Ether Vials, and every single other card in the deck being a Goblin. Goblin Ringleader, you're looking at least hitting 2 cards, and often hitting 3 cards when it comes into play. That's an insane deal, attached to a hasty body that benefits from your Lord and triggers all your Goblin synergies. A 4-mana 2/2 haste that draws you 2 to 3 cards when it comes into play. That's really powerful.
Agreed. I mean, once again, this just definitely makes Goblins now a respectable tribe in Modern.
So, most important question, Crim, before we wrap this up. Is there a way to make Teferi Goblins?
There's always a way. Jeskai Goblins. I mean, you could. You
could like bounce your Ringleader and Ether Violet back into play again to draw more Goblins. Think of all the possibilities.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. I mean, at the just minor cost of inconsistent mana and like all of that, but like, and probably making your Ringleaders significantly worse. Let's think about that, though. Is there even a sorcery spell we could even play at instant speed, like Faithless Looting? Wow. We're just going off here and also making Ringleader consistently worse by having less goblins.
Goblin Grenade at instant speed would be pretty spicy.
Ooh. Is that
like
goblin?
block with your goblin and boom, 5 damage.
What's the goblin tribal spell?
Oh. Yeah, I can't remember. There are options. Okay, I'm expecting it, Crim. I want to see Teferi goblins when the M20 comes out.
To goblins.
All right. I think on that note, that brings us to the end of our top 10 modern cards from Core Set 2020. So, Crim, thanks so much for hanging out.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks to everyone for listening. Let us know what you think. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What cards do you like most from Core Set 2020 for Modern? What do you think about some of the speculative cards like Lotus Field brought back? You got any ideas on how to actually break them? Anything else you like? Let us know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.